Hello, I'm Dr. Giselle Georgie, and I'm your instructor for Biosci 101 this semester, and I'm really looking forward to you. In this video, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal career journey, and it will also it'll tell you about the approach that I have to teaching, which is important for you to know as my student, but also basically it's kind of like, here's why I like to teach you and how I got here. So I actually grew up in a town called Vicenza in northern Italy. Picture my background. Um, yes, it's one of the regions most hit by the pandemic, which has been hard. It's also a phenomenal place to grow up. I loved it so much. Um, my dad was a teacher, and we were there because there's a US Army base, and he's a civilian, or was a civilian, but he was a teacher, and therefore we got to hang out there and live in Italy, and I just loved it. Um, Ironically, I also grew up going, I'm never going to be a teacher. Because dad is, I'm a rebel. What can you say? It's like, I'll do something different. Oh well. I do love it. So why am I telling you about Italy? Well, it's my roots, but also it informs the way that I view education a lot. I was lucky enough to go to Italian school for some of my years. So I talk with my hands when I talk about Italy too. So from fifth grade to about eighth grade, I went to Catholic all girls nuns run by nun school. Turns out just you're probably American, you're thinking nuns so mean. No, no, in Italy, the nuns are these total rebellious feminists, um, mostly, and certainly the ones I was around. So I was already a rebel. It just made it 10 times worse. And and schools there are much tougher than here. There's an expectation that you will just learn all sorts of stuff. So my fifth grade biology was harder. Then went back to the American school for later on. It was harder than my 10th grade biology by a million miles. So that's one thing I came out of Italy with, like, come on. American education is really failing people. They're just letting you get by, skate by with, they're not challenging people. They're keeping them bored and unchallenged. Anyway, just so you know. Um, the other thing that's really different in Italy is the teachers are paid well at all levels, and they have a lot of training. And so education is more equal, and college is basically free. It's a few $100s at most in fees. I took my organic chemistry in Italy, and they were so scared to tell me I had to pay a $20 fee. And I was at Georgetown the meantime. I was like, are you kidding me? So cheap. Um, so it's really is more of a fair playing field. You get a good education to start with, and you can keep going. And college is really hard, but it's really intense. But it's really about self-motivation more than connections. Getting a job, on the other hand, in Italy is all about connections, so it's not perfect. So as you already heard, my dad brainwashed me. He lived in Italy, he loved it, but he was so pro-American the whole time. He's like, you must go to college in the US. So I followed my brother, and I went to Georgetown. I had no clue what I was doing. I was 18, all my friends were Italian. Yeah, I'd been in the American school, but I was really like my best friends who lived next to me. Everybody, my world was Italians. And so I showed up at Georgetown in Washington, D.C., and I look and talk like I'm American. I had no clue what was going on around me. I was so lost. I honestly kind of found my home in an African American church. And then context, Georgetown is full of really quiet people. A lot of them are WASPs, self-proclaimed, prep school up in that Northeast area. They're so quiet. I'm an introvert in Italy, but in the US, suddenly I'm this like outgoing person. Anyway, St. Aloysius was this amazing home for me. And I didn't know, I wanted to do everything in college. I was interested in literally about 30 majors. It was the hardest choice I ever had to make. Um, and looking back, I did get, I was just broke enough to go to an elite school because I paid for it all. And I've learned, the reason schools are elite is because they have a lot of care to the students. They follow you. They make you choose a major rather than spend 6 years, for instance. Well, at the time I was like, really like, why must I choose? I'm only 20. So I chose biology for the sole reason that it had labs and I couldn't read books at home about it. I love books, still do. Um, but I really was interested in everything. This is one of many ways in which I'm kind of telling you my story also to tell you the one story of one scientist. And it's one of the ways I'm different from a lot of scientists. There are a lot of current scientists, we got to change this, y'all, who they've known since they were 3 years old. They're like, I want to be a scientist. You met those people, maybe. I didn't. My family was all a bunch of like lawyers and artists and humanity. My dad taught humanities. He taught careers, actually, ironically, is what I ended up doing too. Um, but I literally didn't meet a scientist until I was at Georgetown. I met somebody through the church who was a grad student there, and I just followed him around in lab. I was like, what do y'all do? And then I loved science. I loved the stories. I found it wonderful. But so I was a bio major and I graduated. I still had no clue what I wanted to do. I was a political activist. I did a volunteer year and a residence. It was amazing in Minnesota for women in crisis of any sort. It was an extraordinary year for me. So I realized I couldn't be a social worker, but I admire very much. I was temping, I was young, I didn't want to be tied down. And I thought, I got to try out this science thing because I knew that what I did in class, I was surrounded in class by pre-meds. There were two of us who weren't pre-meds. I always knew everybody's trying to get me to be a doctor. I don't like sick people. I mean, I wish them well. I just don't want to be near them. So I was like, I don't think I've ever experienced real science that doesn't come in this prefab 3-hour package where I know the result already before I go in. So I was kind of like, before my science degree expires and science has moved on, I don't know anything, I should try the science thing. And I ended up so I was desperate at this point. It was New Year's, and I applied to NIH to be a technician in a lab. I'm going to tell you this story because it's about networking. And I was just like, I got to do this. I was in my, I was young. Every month was like 10 years to me. And somebody offered me a job to be a technician in their lab at NIH, which is what I wanted. And it was taking care of fruit flies. And he said, but I need a 3-year commitment from you. And you're such a nice guy. Everybody's like, just lie to him. And I just went, because it's just my personality. And I said, look, I can't, like, for me, a week is a long time. Like, I've been doing temp jobs. Like, I don't understand the meaning of 3 years. I can't commit to 3 years. And I was like, I'm sorry, I just can't do this. And also, honestly, his job was just feeding the fruit flies. I knew I'd be bored pretty quickly. I'm kind of a novelty junkie, which is why teaching is a great fit for me. So I went home, New Year's, I was all like, oh, I have no future. And then he got in touch with me and said, there's 2 other jobs that want to interview you, and then wanted to hire me, that he recommended me for. Because I turned him down. I said, look, I like everything except 3 years. I can't honestly do it. That same week, he went to meeting with other fruit fly lab people who studied fruit flies. And 2 of them were like, oh, by the end of January, I have funding. I got to hire a tech. I wonder if I could do that. He said, well, I got this gal. She's great. And so I got offered 2 really good jobs by being super honest. I took one of them It was amazing. I worked in a fruit fly lab doing genomics research, and wasn't even called that then, but it was doing genes. I did some really cool stuff with a really amazing group of people, really amazing boss, loved it, fell in love with research, um, utterly loved it. Ended up ironically staying there for 3 years because it was so much fun. I was doing something new constantly in that lab, though. It was amazing. And, I did some really satisfying research that you'll hear stories about, because there's some cool moments there. But I realized I wanted to do this. I was hooked. I was just like, I love discovery science. I love being on the edge of knowing things. And, I also knew my personality ever since I was a little kid. I like to be the boss of things, especially other people, to be honest. But I like to organize people. I just knew, like, as a technician, you're in the lowest rung in a lab. There's a hierarchy. And I was having the time of my life. The people around me knew more than did, but I knew that 10 years from then, I would know as much as them, and I would want to be the boss. And as a technician, you don't get to be the boss. It was as simple as that. So, and I had some good mentors who were like, yeah, go for the power, like it's fine to say you're ambitious, you're young, you know, you're female, it doesn't mean you shouldn't be ambitious. So, I decided to go to grad school, and I got in, to a lot of schools because my boss was connected, and, they recognized his name, and they went, "Oh, good scientist, she's from the." That's the way science is, honestly, like, your credentials come from the scientists, that are, ahead of you in the lab. Usually the main scientist, called a principal investigator, who runs the lab. So, I had done good work, but also they knew him. He's famous. Like, so I got into every grad school. It was really fun to, like, you get flown out and you get to just learn about stuff. I ended up picking Berkeley for a variety of reasons, and I got my PhD at Berkeley. And, I got to do some really fun research, including on a microscope. So that's when the whole microscopy thing kind of started. Well, I did some at Georgetown too. Anyway, fast forward, I got my PhD, which was really tough, and also really wonderful. So it was both. Best time, worst time kind of thing. Getting a PhD, I say, is pretty much about being stubborn enough to just keep going. Like, that's how, and certainly I think that's still true. Um, I was gonna say in those days, but it's still true. I did a cool postdoc at LBL, and then I accidentally started teaching. I was gonna get my next postdoc. You do a series of these, and I realized I didn't have enough teaching on my resume, which ironically, you need to do research. It's a silly system. And I knew someone who had taught at a community college, and I reached out to her and I said, "What is a community college again?" Like, what is this thing? I remember talking to you. You enjoy teaching what's this thing anyway? Remember, I grew up in Italy. College is free. I went to, honestly, elite schools. I mean, Georgetown and UC Berkeley are surrounded by people who've gone to all this sort of little inner circle of elite schools. And she explained, and I went, wait, that sounds like Italian system where anybody can go. So I fell in love with the mission right away. I was kind of annoyed by a lot of things that are wrong with the American educational system at that point, including how elite it is and the way it's structured to kind of just only let certain people succeed. As we, often based on something as irrelevant, well, should be irrelevant as skin color. But, as a biologist, I'm like, variety, nature goes to variety. And then you look at human society and you're like, what are we doing? This is unjust and also stupid, pretty much insane in some ways. Anyway, so I discovered community colleges. I started teaching at one. I got hired at Merit. I love it to this day. I'm so proud to be at the school where the Black Panthers first took form, got organized. I feel like I'm really honored to teach students who are students from Oakland, people of color, first generation students. I get excited when you know, women in science. Basically, I get excited if you're somebody whose journey has been tough maybe or blocked for whatever reason, whether it's systemic racism or systemic sexism or just personal issues. This is what a lot of us who end up in the community college have experienced some form. I've also had my own experiences with trauma and violence and things like that, mental illness in my family. So I kind of relate to people who haven't had sort of obvious, you know, straight-ish little walk in life. I've had a very zigzag life. And I kind of find it really fun to be around people who've had that. No shade if you've had a really straight, obvious walk. There's nice people like that too. So basically, to me, the fun thing about a community college is that everybody comes in the door. As you know, so the UCs are like, we teach the 1% best students, and the CSUs are like, we teach the top 15%, and we all like to say we teach the top 100% of students, you know, and I think that's true. So I just love, love, love the community college system. I love this because of the students and because of its mission. What else do I need to tell you? Check my notes. I start gushing. I'm like, I'm so happy to teach at Merritt College. I'm so glad y'all let me. I get so excited to meet students every year. I'm so happy to be part of helping. What ends up happening is I help a lot of people have zigzag careers like mine. Oh, one of the things I remember I said I didn't want to be a teacher because he loved teaching with his whole heart, but he was one of these teachers who was motivated by knowledge. He was like, if people didn't know things, it would almost upset him. Like he had that drive of like, I gotta make sure people know stuff. Like, and he was very caring. I'm kind of like him in a lot of ways. I learned from him. But the one thing you might find, I might be weird to you. I'm like, this is my science. I'm like, I don't care if you don't know stuff. I care if I know stuff. But it doesn't bother me if you don't know things. Why should it bother me? What does it have to do with me? So that's why teaching wasn't an obvious choice for me at first, until I realized that actually it's the most revolutionary thing that I can do personally in a society that I live in, which is America, which is California, which is Oakland. In this country, teaching is revolutionary because it's limited to certain people. Like having good education is a limited thing, and that's just wrong. I don't know, I wouldn't have the same drive if I were back home in Italy because, you know, education there is pretty egalitarian. Other things aren't, so it's not, again. So yeah, that's how I ended up at Merritt. Part of why I love it. Students like you are what keeps me going, what is my joy when you find a career you like, when you thrive, when you succeed, that makes it all worth it for me. And I'm delighted to get to know you. And I hope this was a fun intro video for you. And I look forward to hearing about your career journey.